The Sunday school lesson for January the 19th, 2025 is Healing 10 Lepers. Luke chapter 17, verses 11 through 19. Welcome, viewers and subscribers, to my channel, Read With Me. I am Audrey. If you are new here, please know that this is an audio reading of the lesson. Hearing a need, Luke chapter 17, verses 11 through 14. Encounter with 10 lepers, Luke chapter 17, verses 11 through 12. Many of those who have studied the chronology of Jesus' life put the raising of Lazarus, John chapter 11, between verses 10 and 11 of Luke 17. Jesus had been at the Feast of Dedication in Jerusalem, but left there because of the Jews' desire to kill him. John chapter 10, verse 39. He traveled to Perea, verses 40, but returned to Bethany upon hearing of Lazarus' illness. Chapter 11, verses 1 through 8. Since a renewed desire to kill him arose after that incident, he left again. Verses 53 through 54. We find him staying outside the places where he knew they were actively looking for him during the period in which Jesus was awaiting the time for his final appearance in Jerusalem. He was traveling on the border between Samaria and Galilee. He thus stayed away from Galilee, where Herod sought to kill him, and from Judea, where the Sanhedrin was plotting to kill him. He was ultimately bound for Jerusalem, but he was following his Father's timing. This is the journey that would lead to his crucifixion. His movements through Galilee and Samaria indicate that his route was not direct. Nevertheless, the goal was unchanged. He ministered as he went, but the statement that he went from Jerusalem, Luke chapter 17, verse 11, reveals that this was his last period of ministry prior to the death he would face after he arrived there. As Jesus entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers. As was required of them, they stood away from the crowds. Leviticus gave instructions regarding lepers. And the leper in whom the plague is, his clothes shall be rent, and his head bare, and he shall put a covering upon his upper lip, and shall cry, Unclean, unclean. All the days wherein the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone. Without the camp shall his habitation be. Chapter 13, verses 45 through 46. The 10 lepers stood at a distance because of these regulations and because of Pharisaic traditions that demanded they do so. They were probably just outside the village Jesus was entering, since they were also required to stay out of town. Instruction for the lepers, Luke chapter 17, verses 13 through 14. There was usually a crowd around Jesus, so the lepers would have had to call out loudly, both because of the distance they had to maintain and in order to be heard above the noise of the people. What they asked for was mercy from Jesus. They needed his empathy and the healing he could grant them. These 10 recognized Jesus and addressed him by name. They also recognized him as having special healing abilities. Verse 13 says they called him Master, using a word found in no other book of the New Testament. In response, Jesus simply told them what they should do. Proceed to show themselves to the priests. He gave no indication that they were healed or were going to be. Their crying out to Jesus probably indicated a measure of faith that he could do what they were asking. A greater measure was required, however, to do what he said without evidence that it would happen. There is a clear parallel with Elijah's healing of Naaman, whom he sent to wash in the Jordan River. 2 Kings chapter 5 verses 1 through 19. Their healing came while they were underway, not before. Whether the healing happened shortly after they began their trek or when they had almost arrived, it is clear that their healing resulted from their obedient faith. The law required a leper who had become healed of the disease to show himself to the priests. Leviticus chapter 13, verses 2 through 3, and chapter 14, verses 3 through 57. When Jesus told them to go show themselves to the priests, therefore, it was a clear implication that their healing was already a reality. Receiving gratitude. Luke chapter 17, verses 15 through 19. Thanks from a Samaritan. Luke chapter 17, verses 15 through 16. Healing sent 9 of the lepers scurrying to the priest at a rapid clip, but one of the men reversed directions. He returned to thank Jesus. He did not seek a private session to say thank you. He shouted praise and thanksgiving to God so everyone could hear. He knew what Jesus did had come directly from God. Not only was this person an unclean leper, but he was also an unclean Samaritan. 2 truths stand out for us in these verses. First, Jesus has compassion on everyone, no matter their spiritual condition, physical condition, religious affiliation, or national association. He heard the pleas from these men and responded immediately. He does not always do that for us, but we can trust him anyway because we know of his compassionate heart. Sometimes his purposes do not include that immediate healing, and we have to go through hard times. That does not, however, indicate lesser compassion. Second, God's response is to those who are needy and humble, not to the self-righteous and proud. Proverbs speaks to this. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogancy, and the evil way, and the froward mouth do I hate. Chapter 18, verse 13. After all, of what do we have to be proud since everything is from him? No doubt this event was a lesson for the Jews, for they would have considered a Samaritan in a negative light and unworthy of God's attention. To see a Samaritan return and loudly proclaim praise to God should have been a source of conviction for them. Questions about the others. Luke chapter 17, verses 17 through 18. Jesus asked questions to which he already knew the answers. It was not that the return of only one surprised him. Rather, it was important that he point out to those observing the importance of acknowledging the work of God and being grateful for it. So he asked, were there not 10 cleansed? But where are the 9? Verse 17. 9 out of 10 received the healing they requested without coming back to express their thanks. The Samaritan who returned revealed a deep understanding of who Jesus was. Whether or not he understood Jesus to be the Messiah, at least he knew he was an agent of God working among humans. In light of the miraculous healing he had just experienced, he returned to give thanks to God. Jesus made a point of clarifying the situation. He mentioned the total number who had asked for healing. He mentioned that 9 had failed to return with thanks. He referred to the fact that in doing this, they had not given glory to the God who had worked on their behalf. And he pointed out that the one returning was a foreigner. He expressed these things as the healed leper was worshiping at his feet. It was indeed a strong, teachable moment from Jesus to everyone listening to and watching him. Assurance of healing. Luke chapter 17, verse 19. This man had the privilege of learning that it was his faith that had brought about his healing, as Jesus said to him, "Arise, go thy way. Thy faith hath made thee whole." His simple act of going was evidence of his faith, an act shared by all 10 of these men. The others, however, did not get to receive this commendation from Jesus. In this statement from the Lord, we get the impression that the man received more than just physical healing. The healed man's response, coupled with the resulting interaction with Jesus, suggests he also received salvation. It is probable, therefore, that the other 9 were healed by their obedience to Jesus' command to show themselves to the priests, but did not receive life-changing eternal salvation. It was a pattern that marked the Jewish people as a nation. They were happy to accept the things Jesus could do for them, like feeding and healing them, without accepting him as their Messiah. So the response by the 9 is not surprising. Pentecost summarized it well. The giving of thanks is a recognition of blessings bestowed. To give thanks to the bestower is an obligation of the recipient. The thankless one counts any benefit as his just due, for which he feels no sense of obligation or need to return thanks. We owe God constant gratitude. James chapter 1, verse 17. Thank you so very much for listening. And remember, every Sunday at 1 o'clock Central Standard Time, I release a new audio for the upcoming Sunday School lesson. Thank you for all that you do to help this channel grow, one viewer and one subscriber at a time. Stay safe and may God bless.